on Bitcoin, and Bcademy, which is a sort of education company doing workshops and courses, and it's a B Academy. And the B is a current under development donation fund for a Bitcoin open source project, which is we are still trying to pull off after a while. So what I will discuss tonight is something that people already accustomed with the Bitcoin space know very well, and it's called Bitcoin Maximalism. And I will try to dissect this meme, this concept of Bitcoin Maximalism. This is me. Okay. So a little bit of personal background. This presentation, this is the second time I give this presentation. I usually don't. The first time it was in Baltic Honey Badger 2018. It was in Riga last September. Some of you guys were there, like you. And the thing is that I didn't finish this presentation. So if you want to see the video of the first time I gave this presentation, you can just take a picture of this link, but you can easily find it on the second day of Baltic Honey Badger 2018. The structure of the presentation was like this. Just like now, I spend basically a lot of useful minutes in giving a personal background for the presentation. So 90% of my presentations is me speaking about why I give in the presentation. That's a problem I always have, but I like to give the context of my presentation, so usually I waste time this way. Then there was an history of the appellation, where the term Bitcoin Maximalist come from. So the history of Vitalik Buterin using this term in order to address people that were thinking that only Bitcoin can work. Basically, the history that Martin gave you is about the rise of this new crypto-anarchist money. But after a first period in which only Bitcoin was there, a lot of people started to propose a different kind of crypto-anarchist or way less crypto-anarchist money. And you started to have people promoting different alternatives to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin maximalism was a term used in a negative way to address somebody who is convinced that only Bitcoin can work in the long term, and it was like an insult. But the point is that great part of the community started to discuss, analyze this kind of criticism, and we basically start to embrace this label as a positive thing. I mean, yes, in this context where everybody is trying to sell you snake oil and Ponzi scheme, yeah, we are proudly Bitcoin maximalists, because we are not in a moment of discovery like 2009 in which we are moving from zero to something, but we are now moving from something to absolute noise, where nobody is able to filter out and to distinguish stuff anymore. So this is a different phase in which Bitcoin maximalism is not an insult, it's something that is a correct, in science you can call that heuristics. So if you don't know something, you want a prima facie heuristic. You want some kind of default position that you can hold until you get proven wrong, like your intellectual default. Like if you are in a trial, your prima facie default is the guy is innocent until proven guilty. That's a good heuristic, because it's better to release a criminal than to imprison an innocent man. So your heuristic is innocent until proven differently. If you meet some guy on the street and he's selling you, okay, if you receive an email by a Nigerian prince or somebody proposing to enlarge your sexual organs, it's a good heuristic to first assume that he is lying before giving him money. Maybe he's not. I mean, everything is possible, but it's a good heuristic to start by this assumption given the actual context. So the second part of my presentation was about the opportunity to adopt this term instead of fighting it, instead of saying, no, you're wrong, I'm not a maximalist, because, yeah, I am, because in this context it makes sense to use this kind of default approach to the very complex and very messy reality we have around. So there was some discussion about other terms being better. For example, somebody was contexted the fact that maximalist in art means somebody wants to put a lot of stuff in, while in theory we are more like like Bitcoin Minimalist, because we want minimal stuff with very clear significance instead of just a big mess. Somebody was even suggesting to change the name into Bitcoin Suprematists, but that was a little bit aggressive as a proposal. So this was the first part of my presentation, and then I was moving on to do a trollish provocation, so to show a slide which 4 sentences that were looking very counterintuitive, very provocative, very rude, very exaggerated. And then after this slide, it was presented semi-ironically, so the idea was to impress people with the slide, and then to go on with a completely rational argumentation, trying to reach a very reasonable, not extreme position about these topics. And then a final surprise. The surprise was to show that paradoxically enough and ironically enough, when you finish your very open-minded, reasonable, and completely intellectually honest argument about these topics, you finish in some kind of heuristics which are very close to the super exaggerated, outrageous, trollish, provocative slide of the beginning. So that was the principle, the idea of my presentation. Unfortunately, the presentation was not finished. The first reason is that I spent half of the presentation talking about why I wanted to give the presentation just right now. So I continue to do the same mistake. And the second problem is that Baltic Honey Badger was a great presentation. It is a great conference. I suggest you to look at the 2019 edition and to go to Riga. I will be there, and I will speak again. But there are a lot of great speakers. And we cannot give, I mean, tonight you will stay with me for 3-4 hours of present. No, I'm joking. no, probably we can finish this up in an hour, including the question, hopefully. Probably I'm lying, but let's say that it's 1 hour. But back then I had 35 minutes, and this project was too ambitious for 35 minutes. So what happened? I didn't finish the presentation. I just could do the introductory part and the provocation, and then some Twitter shitcoiners start to happen. Who are Twitter shitcoiners? Twitter shitcoiners are the people that are whose profession is to sell you the Bitcoin-like equivalent of Nigerian princess, and they do that as a job. And they don't like they really don't like Bitcoin maximalists, because Bitcoin maximalists they use as a personal hobby to debunk the lies or the misconceptions spread by shitcoiners. So the first shitcoiner started to take the slide. It was Chris Pacha. It was the guy that inspired my whole presentation, actually, with a long tweet storm back then. And this guy took my slide out of context. Then famous scammers like Roger Ver, they took the outrageous slide, the screenshot, and another scammer called Craig Wright did the same in a blog post called Hoarding and Bitcoin. And then this created a lot of outrage, a lot of debate. Are maximalists so stupid that they really think these 4 things? And now I will show you the 4 things in detail so we can analyze them properly. The interesting thing is that, in a way, my presentation, I mean, I think it is not exaggerated to say that my presentation polarized the discussion even more. Some people was very galvanized, like, yeah, this is finally what I believe. Finally, we can use the term maximalism not as an insult, but as a filter between reason and shitcoiners. But other people started to be threatened by these very outrageous sentences, and they started to fight Bitcoin maximalism even more. For example, you have very rational, very, let's say, balanced people like this guy, Ferdous Bai, that tweeted out after the conference, if you support Bitcoin maximalism, you are basically helping the terrorists win. So this is the kind of very measured and balanced reaction that some part of the community had. So I think that I thought it was a good idea to give the presentation again, finishing the discussion and maybe closing up. It will never be closed, but trying to move some step in a direction of some kind of mutual understanding. These are the 4 universal truths. The first universal truth, you can see just from the title that I'm mocking up Buddhism here, so there it's clearly an ironic, a semi-ironic slide, meaning that I'm exaggerating the importance of this truth. I will give you some example of the contrary, but they are not completely ironic. This is not a parody. These are sentences that look exaggerated, but when you actually think about that at the end, these paradoxically end up to be a very good approximation of the heuristic that you should use if you're not sure of what you're doing. So the first is everything which is not Bitcoin is a scam. Like everything, so is Bitcoin? No, then it's a scam. Scam, scam, everything is a scam. Second, every attempt at changing Bitcoin is a scam. But yeah, Bitcoin is cool, but we can change maybe the block size, the block rate, scam. Yeah, but maybe we can, the monetary supply in the future will not be enough, so we can change it, scam. But we can reorg the chain if there is a theft, scam. So this is the second truth. Every attempt at changing Bitcoin is a scam. Third is, this is the most paradoxical. Even some Bitcoin Maximalist was disturbed by the third one. Every attempt at pushing people to spend Bitcoin is a scam. So, I mean, we spend so many years telling people, you should use Bitcoin. And every time you push people to spend Bitcoin, are you a scammer? That was very, very aggressive. And the last one, since somebody raised this notion that, sure, you can say that somebody's wrong, somebody is making no sense, but we should always be nice with each other, right? Why cannot just we all get along? And my fourth truth was, we shouldn't be nice to scammers. So in the context of the presentation, I mean, you guys were there. I think in Riga, the mood of the presentation was pretty clear. People were laughing, and we were having a good time. We were insiders in a group, so we understood each other. But on Twitter, this created some kind of panic. Yeah, three munch screams. So this is the slide that started to go around in order to show that Bitcoin maximalists are actually very toxic and close-minded and nasty. We are, but not exactly in this way. So what I can do now, the first thing I want to do, yesterday I was reviewing again this presentation in order to give it again to you tonight, and I had an idea, and I immediately called the guy organizing Baltic Honey Badger 2019 in Riga next September to propose them my next speech. So this speech was called the Bitcoin Maximalism Dissected, and it was a very aggressive speech. So the next speech will be called Shitcoin Apologism Still Manned. It will be a detox talk about niceness, open-mindedness, inclusion, good faith presumption, and safe spaces. And I will try to spend my 35 minutes in Riga in order to defend rationally shitcoiners. I mean, they probably have some rational argument. I will find it, and I will try to still man it and to present it defending our fellow shitcoiners. So this will be for sure a step in the direction of pacification and reconciliation. But I also want to give you the original presentation, and this time I have an agreement with Martin. Nobody will be able to stop me. You cannot even shut down the light. I will go on forever. And I added a new slide, which I called Da. Which is a slide that tried to give you some counterexample, explain that we cannot, obviously, mean those 4 rules literally. Let's start with the first rule. The first rule is that everything which is not Bitcoin is a scam. This is was said on stage by a guy which for example, uses the other projects alternative to Bitcoin, other projects different to Bitcoin. For example, Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol, as Martin explained. The internet itself is a decentralized protocol. TCP/IP protocol is a decentralized protocol. Is it Bitcoin? No. Is it a scam? No. So probably there is some exception to my rule. HTTP, Git, BitTorrent, Tor, IRC, they are all things I use every day. I respect this project, I praise this project, I support these projects, I suggest to use this project. So probably that means that the first rule doesn't really need to be literal. Bitcoin is not just a decentralized protocol, because Bitcoin is also the name of the underlying financial asset. The fact that I say that everything which is not Bitcoin is a scam, does that mean that I consider any financial asset which is not Bitcoin a scam? Not at all. I personally consider physical gold as something which very different security assumption from Bitcoin. Bitcoin is better in some regards and worse in some other regards. In case of total technological annihilation, probably gold can resist better than Bitcoin, but in the age of information, Bitcoin is more useful than gold, easier to check the inflation rate. So I think they have trade-off, but I will never say that people suggesting you to hedge your Bitcoin position with physical gold is scamming you. Physical gold is not a scam, but it's not Bitcoin. Real estate is not a scam. I mean, unless it is a scam. But if it's good real estate, it's not a scam. And some kind of financial security, some kind of stocks and bonds of tech companies, some of them are absolutely legit, absolutely good. Also, other projects which are not decentralized protocol, but just brands and projects like Wikipedia, WikiLeaks, Debian. These are all projects that I love. Wikipedia not so much recently, but traditionally it was a great project. And I support them and I praise them. Also, I like houses, wheels, antibiotic, and pizza. Some Bitcoin maximalists will tell you that pizza is a scam, actually. But I'm from Italy, so I will never accept this extreme position. I mean, I try to eat more meat and less carbs, but pizza cannot really be a scam. I mean, I don't believe that. So, so it's obvious for everybody which is not in bad faith that a prima facie heuristic like everything which is not Bitcoin is a scam cannot be intended literally. But also the same goes for the second rule. Every attempt at changing Bitcoin is a scam. This is coming from a guy that was absolutely supporting the update of Bitcoin last year. Actually, during the Riga presentation, just in those days, there was a very bad bug was discovered in Bitcoin that was allowing potentially an attacker to inflate the supply of Bitcoin. It was discovered, it was fixed, it was patched, and now we were pushing people to upgrade the change in order to fix the bug. And that happened also, unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often. It's a very rare situation, unlike with shitcoins, where bugs are continuous. In Bitcoin, it's a rare situation, but it does happen. Also, I was a promoter and supporter of SegWit, which was a very big change in the way Bitcoin works. It was a very difficult change to implement and to deploy on the network, and there were people like me and many others with hats and t-shirts pushing for this kind of implementation. So we were pushing for a change in Bitcoin in a way, but moreover, we are pushing for new changes in Bitcoin in the future, like for example, Schnorr signature. This is a technical topic. If somebody of you is curious at the end, maybe we will discuss it a little bit in the question and answers. But Schnorr signature are a different way to do digital signature from the way that Satoshi Nakamoto could use in 2009. And they are objectively a better way to sign stuff than a CDSA. So we are pushing for a change in Bitcoin. Also, Bitcoin layerization, the creation of different layers like the Lightning Network, that's a change in the way Bitcoin works in general. If we consider Bitcoin as a global system, anytime we add new layers like the Lightning Network, like Liquid on side, Liquid is not a scam. Lightning Network is not a scam. And they are changes in the way Bitcoin works from a user experience point of view. Also, there are UX improvement, education, adoption, all things that will change the way Bitcoin works. So let's go to the third rule. The third rule is that every time you push people to spend Bitcoin, that's a scam. Of course, even in this case, that's not really what we think, literally speaking. There is the reckless hashtag on Twitter that is people praising other people to spend Bitcoin on Lightning Network just to try Lightning Network, even for stupid things. There was like a website where you could play Super Mario Bros. And you have to pay Bitcoin in order to move Super Mario. Does that make any economical sense? No. But that's cool because we're experimenting with the new technology to pay for stuff. And so we were pushing people to spend Bitcoin to try it out, a very small quantity of Bitcoin. Also, there is the unbanked. It's not really an hashtag, but just for sake of symmetry, I put an hashtag. The unbanked is many of us stopped having a bank account at all. There are some Bitcoiners that are living off Bitcoin exclusively without any credit card, without any bank account, nothing and nothing and nothing. They are doing that successfully since years. It's difficult, it's challenging, but it's possible. And it's not that Bitcoin maximalists are saying you should not spend Bitcoin. They only have Bitcoin. They should spend Bitcoin, of course. So what we mean with pushing people to spend is a scam is clearly something different. Also, in the same conference where I gave this presentation, I was asking for Bitcoin donation with the B Foundation. So clearly, I was asking people to spend Bitcoin. And we support, for example, well, no, we don't support, but we do know somebody supporting black markets on the dark web, and they spend Bitcoin all the time in order to acquire products on the free market. We have conferences like the one in Malta where we accepted payment in Bitcoin directly. So was that a scam? Well, yes, because there was no meat in the carnivore dinner, but that was another discussion. Last rule. The last rule is we should not be nice with scammers. Is this literal? No. For example, I get along all the time with Fluffy Pony, the maintainer of Monero, and Charlie Lee, the maintainer of Litecoin. We were together with Charlie on a cruise. I love Fluffy. Also, Fluffy is the only scammer which is an honest scammer because he admits that he is a scammer. So that's the best kind of scammer. And Monero is, technologically speaking, a great project that I am interested in. I study. So they're the best scammer, and I'm friendly with them. But also there are other scammers here that are absolutely friendly with. Dash scammers are very funny, and I love them. So I tend to be nice with scammers. And there are some scammers that are so over the top, so exaggerated, so incredibly scammy. For example, if you think about John McAfee. John McAfee, somebody of you may not know him. He was one of the pioneers of antivirus back in the 90s, and now he's selling scam coins all the time. He's promoting any kind of scam in the space. But he is very funny. I mean, he tells incredible stories. I mean, it's more like entertainment. People is wasting money on his scams as we pay for a ticket at the cinema. It's like more an artist of entertainment. So, I mean, I had no problem to get along with John McAfee. So this is not even literally true. So what do I mean when I talk about these rules? Let's try to move to the rational explanation. This is a very complex reasoning, so I will try to keep it simple and I will try to go fast. But if let's say if I see 2 people fainting in the room, I will go on. If I get to 4 people passing out, I will probably stop. Let's see how long I can go. So I would like to start from these 10 reasonable assumptions, and I would like for you to think if you share my view that these assumptions are completely reasonable. I gave them a title. Hard versus. Okay, I will give you an idea of each one. The first one is what I call the hard versus easy assumption. So it reads like this: money which is hard to create and hard to censor is something difficult to have, especially in the age of internet and under Orwellian regimes. We have plenty of alternatives for money which is easy to create and easy to censor. And when we cannot use them, it's because we need hard money instead. And hard money could be really disruptive. So what I mean with this assumption is, it's OK to think that money which is easy to censor, maybe because it's centralized. I mean, let's think about US dollar on PayPal. US dollar on PayPal is OK. They can close your account anytime they want. They can inflate the dollar supply until your dollar doesn't mean anything. But it's a very fast experience, has a good adoption, good network effect, they have a good customer support. So they are trade-off, and when you use something that they call easy money, money which is easy to inflate and easy to censor, you are getting something in return. It's legit to use that kind of stuff. But the problem is that we are richer if we have an alternative. Alternative cannot be diluted until it gets similar to the other alternative. Otherwise, it's completely useless. So if we have PayPal and we have Bitcoin, we have different solutions for different problems, and we can choose which one we want to use. If we are crypto anarchists, we will probably use Bitcoin. If you are the average Joe, we will probably use PayPal with US dollar. For now, until the US dollar collapses, and then everybody will use Bitcoin, but that's another problem. So we have two choices. It doesn't make sense to change Bitcoin in order to make it easier to use until it becomes completely undistinguishable from the easy money we already have. So Bitcoin must be preserved in its difference, because if we lose the differences, then there is no point in having Bitcoin at all. So this is my first assumption, right? Sure, we can make Bitcoin easier to use if we create a Bitcoin company with a CEO that we can, with a customer service, but that will make Bitcoin centralized and identical to Venmo or TransferWise, and we already have Venmo and TransferWise. Bitcoin is unstable as a price and a purchasing power. So can we create a central bank to make Bitcoin stable by changing the monetary supply? Sure, but we already have political central banks. So let's use the central bank we have if we really want to, and let's save Bitcoin specificity as something completely different. Even if this has a cost, even if that makes Bitcoin harder to use, still the important thing is that you preserve its specific purpose. The second assumption is Coinbase and blockchain. This assumption is basically this. There is nothing really new in Bitcoin, technologically speaking. Bitcoin is not a new technology. Bitcoin is a system, is a political action which includes some pre-existing technology. Most of them are legacy, like digital signature, decentralized database. All of this technology were already existing. Many of these technology are already used by legacy system. Public key cryptography is used by the internet all the time with TLS. So there is nothing technologically very new in Bitcoin, except for two things. And those two things are the Coinbase process. The Coinbase process is a process in which every block of Bitcoin, you get new Bitcoins in the system, but always at the same rate every 10 minutes, and then you have half of the supply and half of the supply until the supply goes to zero. This is the fixed monetary policy. This is something new that nothing else have. You cannot create that kind of policy in a central bank or in existing stuff. So the Coinbase process with the proof of work is a new thing with the difficulty adjustment and the halving, and the blockchain concept, which is a way to basically avoid double spending, as Martin explained, without any central point of failure. These technologies are two technologies that make the difference in Bitcoin. They are not perfect. For example, the blockchain technology, you can read on the newspaper that the blockchain is a great innovation. The blockchain is a necessary innovation in order for Bitcoin to work, but it's not this great innovation. The blockchain is a very slow, very inefficient, very expensive, and very bad for privacy innovation. Many previous systems like DigiCash by David Chaum, they were better than Bitcoin as a speed, privacy, cost of transaction, because they didn't use the blockchain. But because they didn't use the blockchain, they were centralized, and so they were easy to shut down. But the blockchain is not a silver bullet, it's not a panacea, it's not the magic, it's not that you can take the magic powder of blockchain and make the system better. Blockchain actually makes the system worse. Indeed, what we are doing in Bitcoin is trying to avoid to use the blockchain anytime is possible, so we can have a system which is faster, cheaper, and more private. So we don't want blockchain as a cargo cult, as an idol. Blockchain is just one piece of technology that creates a lot of friction, a lot of inefficiencies. So this is the second assumption. I know that this assumption look very disconnected, but the next slide I will connect all together, creating a lot of nausea in the audience. So the third assumption that I hope is also reasonable for you is the cloning theorem. It's a mockery of the no-clone theorem of quantum mechanics. Basically, the idea is in open source software, if you can copycat the software, somebody will. And if there is money to be made, literally speaking, money to be made with the software, somebody will come and will try to copy it. We have to expect a huge economical and social pressure for everybody to start to create their own coin, because the Bitcoin software is free, open source. Everybody can copy it, and everybody will try to copy it. There is a typical kind of dynamic in money creation in which every person that can create money will try to create money. And then everybody will try to create money, and then the money that is in the market will be less and less valuable because of this dynamic. It's let's say, some kind of tragedy of the common in which everybody is incentivized to create more and more money. So in the case of Bitcoin, you have to expect that everybody will try to create their scam coin. That's just inevitable. It's not a surprise. It's a predictable tendency that we have to expect from people around us. So the fourth assumption, which is, this is complex, but this is, I think, is very, very important. I call it top versus down. So there is this idea that since we want competition and free market and evolution, then everything should always be replicated several times by many competing entities. This assumption instead is that social systems and complex systems in general are layered. There are base layer and there are upper layers. For example, base layers are infrastructures, languages, protocols, and upper layers are products and services. And in reality, even if we want free markets and free interaction and free competition, the free competition doesn't produce the same effects at the upper layer or at the lower layers. At the lower layers, competition produces the opposite of the upper layers. Let's think about an app on Facebook. Let's think about a game like Candy Crusher, the game on Facebook. That's not an infrastructure. That's not a protocol. That's just a service. You don't want everybody playing to Candy Crusher, and you don't want everybody playing Candy Crusher forever. I don't even know if it exists anymore. I mean, it was an example I was using 2 years ago. Maybe that's not even a thing anymore. So at the Candy Crusher layer, you want different people competing with different games. You want thousands of different games, and you want these games to be forgotten and created anew continuously. So you want competition and you want evolution. If you go to a layer lower, is under Candy Crush, and you go to Facebook itself, you don't want thousands of Facebooks. You probably, the market right now wants probably 3 Facebooks, like vContacti, Facebook, and I don't know what else. That kind of service is basically provided by 3 providers globally, or even 2. And there are similar services like Twitter or LinkedIn for other purposes. So, but you don't want that kind of competition, and you don't want that kind of evolution. You don't want to change here like you change your Candy Crush game. You don't want Facebook evolving too much. Every time a social network changes the UX, everybody complains forever, and there is like an insurgence because everybody's unhappy for the change. Then try to imagine, but Facebook can change, and you can have competition. Like MySpace was disappeared, and now we have Facebook. So there is an evolution, even if it's lower. Let's go one layer deeper, and we go to the World Wide Web, where Facebook is built upon. We don't want the World Wide Web to change very much or many competition, because, for example, Facebook and any other services, they're using API, web-based API, and every time the World Wide Web changes, you basically destroy all the upper layer of API connected applications. So you don't want the World Wide Web to change much, and you don't want 7 different World Wide Web. You want 1. even when people had different protocols, they started the free market, not an imposition of somebody, but the free market gradually converge over the use of fewer and fewer methods, and then they all unified and converge to basically web API. Now, any application that you build, you will probably use the web in order to communicate, even if sometimes it doesn't make strictly sense. But you do that because you want to converge to a common language. Let's go even deeper. Below the web, there is the internet itself, TCP/IP. Well, there is actually also other layers, but there is TCP/IP. You don't want evolution in TCP/IP. TCP/IP was finalized with version 4 in 1983. It's a lot of time ago. There were proposals in the 90s by regulators, governments, to change TCP/IP, and the market, the free market, said, no, thank you. The governments and institutions and companies, they were pushing to change it, and they said, no, thank you, because we don't want something new. We want something reliable and continuous and interoperable and common to everybody. So you don't have evolution, and you don't even have competition. Even during the Cold War, there was a debate of having the US-based internet and the Russian internet. But at the end, the convergence right now, even China is using, even with the Great Firewall, but they are using the same, China and the USA, they're using the same protocol, not competing protocols. That doesn't mean that the protocol is perfect. TCP/IP is not perfect, it sucks. For example, when people were trying to use Skype, voice over IP, they said it cannot be done on TCP/IP. TCP/IP is not scalable enough to do voice over IP. We have to change it. And the market said, no, find a way to make Skype work on TCP/IP. Today, when we call with Facebook call, FaceTime, or WhatsApp, or Telegram, we use this ugly, old, immutable, basically since the 80s, protocol, which is still at version 4. That means that there is not any better version. No, there is some better version. For example, there is TCP/IP version 6 is arguably better. We are trying to migrate since how much right now? Probably 20 years, if not more. Yeah, like, I don't know the numbers right now, but I think like probably 20% of the internet is also migrating. But the internet is staying there, it's not migrating. So the idea of this assumption is that for products, you want evolution and competition. But for protocols, the more deep you go, the more you want stability and convergence, because in this room, as you can hear from my Oxfordian pronunciation, English is not my first language. And for many of you, English is not the first language anyway. Are we competing for the better language in this room? No, we are converging over English because of network effect, because we want to be able to communicate together. And even if it's not the best language, arguably English, for example, the phonetics of English is pure madness. I mean, who came up with something that you write that way, you read that way? But still, we need that to interoperate, and we use that. So this assumption, which is very important, is that is not that the free market always create proliferation and evolution. Sometimes it creates consolidation, convergence, and stability, especially at protocol level. And I will argue later that Bitcoin is very, very down. As a system, as infrastructure, is a little bit down, a little bit like TCP/IP. And as asset, as economical asset, is even deeper, even below the infrastructure level. For example, you can move the Bitcoin technology to a new technology. We can create a new blockchain with different mechanisms, or not even a blockchain. But what is the reason to recreate the economic asset from scratch every time we recreate the system? We could create a better Bitcoin version 6, and we could migrate there without rebootstrapping the asset. Why, when you start a new technology, you also have to start scarce digital money from scratch? So that's another important assumption. The fifth assumption that I'm using here is what I'm very provocatively calling the immaculate conception of Bitcoin, adopting a term from religious dogmas. Immaculate conception was not a conception of Jesus, as many people think. It was a conception of Mary, mother of Jesus, that was born without any original sin. So Bitcoin showed a degree of resistance to external censorship or internal corruption that cannot be effectively replicated because of the extraordinary uniqueness of the historical condition at the beginning. The first thing is Satoshi's OPSEC. OPSEC means operational security. The skills that Satoshi and the dedication and the results that Satoshi showed at staying anonymous or pseudonymous without leaving any trace. You can do that in 2008 and 2009 because nobody's looking for you, because there is no Bitcoin. Crypto anarchist money is an experiment that 20 people are trying since a decade, failing. So literally nobody cares. There is probably less than 100 people in the world even mildly interested in that. So it's not that the NSA is looking for you. Nobody's looking. I mean maybe, but even if somebody was looking, we can be certain that right now any operation that tries to keep somebody pseudonymous is under a heavier scrutiny and under a heavy attempt to compromise it. Compromise a project doesn't mean that the project owner is evil. It does mean that maybe he's good, but maybe some guy from some company can pay him to be a little less good, or can kidnap his children to be a little less good. So there is a lot of degree of compromisation that you can do to a project. If Bitcoin was starting right now in a world where Bitcoin exists, Bitcoin will be under a very heavy scrutiny that will probably make it impossible to Satoshi Nakamoto to stay anonymous. If you don't mind, I switch the question to later, so I continue the flow. So with this, I don't mean that I know for a fact that the immaculate conception of Bitcoin was effective. It may be not enough. So Bitcoin could be compromised. Satoshi Nakamoto could be maybe in a jail of the CIA somewhere. We don't know if it was enough. What I'm saying now is that any attempt to recreate it will be way, way weaker than the original attempt, because now you are under scrutiny. Also, there is Satoshi's incentives. When Satoshi created Bitcoin, he was not expecting to buy a Lamborghini in the next months. After the several Bitcoin bubbles, and then the shitcoin bubbles, and then the ICO bubble, now people in this space, they expect to, sometimes I talk with guy and they say, you know, I didn't want to launch my scam token, but how can I pay for the work I'm doing? And if you think about that, Satoshi didn't ask this question. He didn't come up with the mailing list like, you know, I may have an idea. I can send you the white paper, but first you have to give me $20 million. No, he just created the white paper. Nobody cared. He created the software. He launched the software, and then he started to work. That doesn't mean that you cannot ask for money. Asking for money is not immoral. But the problem is that incentives of Satoshi were very not economically strictly, not strictly connected with monetization. Satoshi could afford to launch something because the world, in his opinion, needed that, not because he wanted to make money in the short term. You cannot replicate that. Even if you can replicate that, people around you will not. Even if you are the most ascetic, anti-money person and you create a new decentralized protocol, the new scam coin, and you don't think about money, you will attract, like honey, like a honeypot, people looking for money. That's inevitable for the way incentives are built now. Even if you are in good faith, you will attract people seeking for Lamborghinis right now. That's inevitable. And also historical salience. So in game theory, there is a thing called Schelling point. Basically, when many people have to coordinate, there are some natural or artificial points that everybody can agree upon. For example, if I tell you, let's meet in Uster, but I don't tell you where, probably many of us will go to what is more similar to the center or the station, because it has a historical, obvious salience. it's a focal point, a Schelling point. Bitcoin historically is the first. So it's the default focal point for everybody. You cannot recreate that for the simple fact that anything you do now will not be the first by historical definition. So let's go a little bit quicker so I can finish the connection, and maybe I do a small break for the questions, and then I take over the deduction. Let's go to the 6th, which is scam definition. People sometimes ask me what I mean with scam in the context of this presentation. And so in Bitcoin, we are using this term in a very broad way. I will be the first to acknowledge that right now we desemantize the word a little bit. And I mean, when I meet my friend Lawrence Naum from Green Wallet, we always say, hey scammer, hey scammer. So it's very, I mean, we abuse the term a lot because we have fun with it. But in this context, I mean that if somebody acquires money, wealth, power, fame, or Lambos by lying to other people about something, and that somebody had any chance to understand that he is or she is lying using available knowledge and logic reasoning, then he or she is a scammer. So if you get money by promoting something which is false, and you can know that it's false easily, then you are a scammer. Let's move to the 7. 7, this is very important. This is what people didn't get from the shitcoiner representation of this presentation on the internet. This is the simplification proviso. When you have to counteract social attacks or just noise, or when you are discussing a very complex system, it's often okay to oversimplify and to reduce the nuances, at least prima facie, in order to create a set of useful heuristics easy to communicate and to use. This is what I was saying at the beginning. So let's consider these 3 sentences. Let's start with the 1. You shouldn't roll your own cryptography. If you work in the cryptography world, people, teachers, educators, experts will tell you, you don't roll your own cryptography, which means use cryptographic function that already exists, never invent your own. Of course, if you take this literally, nobody would have invented cryptography in the first place. David Chaum did roll his cryptography, and Ralph Merkel did the same, and Schnorr did the same. People did do that, so they did violate this principle. But still, when you have to communicate in a complex system with a lot of noise, with a lot of confusion, a very clear message, which is probably, very likely, not the best choice to roll out a new cryptographic function that was completely untested and that nobody can use. If you can use something existing, then you should. This is the first sentence. Second sentence, you cannot trust Nigerian princes. So this sentence is not literally true again. If you Google actual Nigerian princes, you will know that in Nigeria there are a lot of tribal realities with kings, and their sons are actually princes. And many of them are nice people, completely honest, and they are not trying to scam you. So it's not exactly true that Nigerian princes are always scammers. Still, the sentence, you cannot trust Nigerian princes, is a good proxy of reality that, especially with new buyers, with people coming for the first time, we can use. It's not nasty, it's not toxic, it's not evil to tell people don't trust Nigerian princes. I'm sorry for the actual Nigerian princes, but they don't count. They are a statistical noise. The last one that I really hope that when the recording of this presentation will go online, people will bitch a lot about this sentence. I will try to contest the literal sentence. The Earth is definitely not flat. So you have to know that in theoretical physics there is something called there is a toy model called basically the anti-de Sitter conformal field theory, in which basically a toy model of our 3D universe is actually completely dual with a 2D conformal field theory model. That means that the whole universe could be completely flat, including the Earth. So there could be a meaning in which the Earth, the planet we live on, is actually 2D and completely flat for real, but based on actual physical principle. That is true. I mean, we don't know if it's true because our universe is not anti-de Sitter, is de Sitter, so the curvature is positive and not negative. But it's in principle, many physicists think that the universe could be two-dimensional plus time and not three-dimensional, so the Earth is flat. What does that mean? That we can go around in a conference of geology and say that the Earth is actually flat and otherwise we are being toxic maximalist? No, we can simplify. So this seventh assumption, the proviso, is it's okay to simplify a complex matter in some kind of prima facie heuristic. Let's go to 8. 8 is also very important. Not only you have to expect by the cloning theorem that everybody will try to create money, you can also expect that everybody will try to create a conspiracy, a populistic conspiracy theory. What I mean with this? What I mean is that life is full of trade-offs. So when you have something, you have to give up something else. And there is a natural tendency in human culture to spread the meme, the theory, that trade-offs are all artificially created by evil people. So there is a very reassuring philosophy, which is, no, we don't have to choose between having fun or making money. We can always do both. Every trade-off in life is just fake, created by an evil minority of reptilian conspirators. You find these everywhere, especially in economics. In economics, the idea is there is no scarcity. You are not poor because you are not serving the market. You are poor because there is an evil cable of secret agents keeping you poor. And in the Bitcoin space, you start to find this dynamic a lot. For example, I'm sorry, but the technology is such that if you have bigger blocks or more frequent blocks, you have lower fees, but you also have higher cost of synchronization of node. So you get something, but you give us something. And then you have to expect a lot of people telling you, no, this is a lie. We can have everything without any kind of sacrifice. The only reason you think there is a trade-off is because there is a secret cable of reptilian agents telling you otherwise. This is not something that happens only in Bitcoin. You should expect this in basically any complex field. There is a natural, everybody wants to think that you can have a cake and eat it too. It's natural. Everybody will love to believe this. And so you have to expect people to pushing for this narrative. If you have an expert saying, you can do this, but then you will lose that, you will see 200 people saying, liar, you are just working for the secret organization to try to create artificial scarcity. So let's go to the last two. The last, the ninth is a social layer. With this assumption, I mean that systems like Bitcoin, they are not exclusively technological. They are not just digital. They are not just software. Money, and Bitcoin in particular, but any protocol like TCP/IP, they are social protocol. The TCP/IP works because I can expect other people to to choose browsers which are compatible with the TCP/IP. So there is a social expectation, and there are social dynamics, and it's not true that Bitcoin is just software and it doesn't care what people think or what people believe. Bitcoin does care what people think or believe, and you can destroy a very elegant technical protocol if you destroy its social layer. Bitcoin has a social layer that can be attacked and can be damaged by social attacks. And so, in many cases, while attacking Bitcoin technically is very expensive, for example, if you want to reorg the blockchain to bail out a scammy exchange, you have to spend a lot of money. But mostly the social attacks, like spreading lies or spreading false dichotomies, this is basically free. You can attack the social layer of Bitcoin without spending any money, just spending some tweets or some fake conferences or stuff like that. So we have to expect social attacks on the social layer of Bitcoin. The last one, it's inner regulator. So it's not what I will argue with this assumption is that it's not true that the more crypto-anarchists we are, so we are open to innovation, we don't want to stop anybody from experimenting, we want a free market, a competing market. It's not true that if we want competing market, if we like freedom of speech, then we should stop calling out scammers or debunking lies or being aggressively defending the truth. I will argue it's the other way around. Since we don't want the police to put people in jail because they are lying to their customers, since we are trying to go over the traditional legal system in this space, Bitcoin is making the traditional legal system obsolete in many ways. For example, many people right now this is just a theoretical example, are scared to say that the con artist Craig Stephen Wright is a fraud. I can tell it on camera like Craig Stephen Wright is a fraud. Why? Because even if he sues me, he's suing a lot of people, and even if he win, I don't have Bitcoin. I've lost all my Bitcoins in a tragic boating accident, so I own literally zero, and I can face any kind of libel accusation in a courtroom. I don't care. So Bitcoin is changing dynamics very much. For example, for me, it changes dynamics completely. My family is not in danger if I get sued by some kind of con artist. So I don't care. But since Bitcoin is making the traditional law system obsolete in many ways, we don't have to be easygoing with lies and frauds and scams or fraudulent marketing. The other way around, we have to start to self-police on a cultural level, and we have to start to go stricter and more critical on the cultural level, because we are in part making obsolete the state level. So many people tell us like, if you are a real free market anarchist, you should, live and let live. You should never debunk a liar when he's selling scams to people. No, I should, because I will not put him in jail, because I don't want him to be put in jail. I want another layer of protection, which is telling the truth and promoting the truth and educating people and debunking and counteracting bad actors. So now I will stop a little bit for questions, because now it comes the derivation. So my goal for the next 5 hours is from these 10 assumptions to arrive to the 4 outrageous and toxic and scandalous universal truths that we discussed at the beginning. And this is the path. So this is not a joke. I really spent 3 hours the night before the presentation in Riga to connect this dot in a way that makes sense. So I'm already satisfied of the fact that I managed to read properly to explain properly all the assumptions. So I feel already satisfied a bit by this presentation. This is not live stream, so there shouldn't be any shitstorm immediately.
No, but next week.
Next week, when the video will be out, I will love Roger Berg contesting my flat earth theory. That would be my preferred outcome. Questions?
Could you expand a little bit on the Bitcoin as a protocol theory, like compared to an internet? Like, what does it actually mean in practice?
So, repeat the question. So the question is to expand a little bit before going on the Bitcoin as a protocol and not as a product part. There is a lot of people saying we cannot have Bitcoin as the only protocol long run, because look at cars. We have Model T, and now we have other kind of cars. Look at MySpace. So the typical arguments are MySpace and the car, basically the car model. I will argue that Bitcoin is completely on the side of protocols in 2 different ways. Let's start from the simple way, which is the Bitcoin protocol as a software, let's say, the Bitcoin software, which is design, characteristic, and specification. This kind of protocol is very similar to TCP/IP in a way. You have basically 2 levels. You have one level, which is similar to IP, where you have a broadcast consensus where everybody is transmitting to anybody, which is very inefficient but very reliable, very stable. And then you have the equivalent of TCP, which is Lightning Network on top, which is finding routing paths over IPs. So it is a similar level where TCP/IP is the transmission of information, and what this information can mean from the point of view of extracting images or sound or a website is a question relegated to the layers on top. The same goes for Bitcoin, where what a payment means from the point of view of escrows, smart contract, liability, whatever the payment means, it's completely delegated to other layers that can be UX layers or it can be smart contract layers and so on and so on. Where the base Bitcoin layer, if you think about that, typically the top level products, they serve very specific niche request. They're specific, not just, they're specific in two ways. The amount of people interested, while Bitcoin tried to solve money in a very general terms. It's true that today we have alternatives, and Bitcoin doesn't cover all the alternatives properly. Bitcoin is not the best choice to pay for a coffee in Uster, for sure, right now. But eventually, it covers money as a concept. While, for example, the specific, I don't know, the specific Facebook game just cover a specific group of people needs in that specific game. And not just across people, but also across time. A specific game only cover your needs in this time, while Bitcoin, being money, needs to cover also intergenerational needs. For example, one of the characteristics of money is that I have to be able to leave my money to my children. I don't have to be able to leave my Candy Crusher score to my children usually. So many of the products, they are ephemeral. I want to consume them, but I don't need to leave them to later generation. While money and the system made for money like Bitcoin is conceived to be, it's conceived to serve different times and different people without any specific niche market. Also, products are usually for-profit, proprietary, characterized by a brand owned by somebody. When you want the top level of the complex layers, the top layer is competitive. Since it's competitive, if you invest in creating a new game, you want to be paid. So you want your name, you want your profit, you want your fees. While when you invest in infrastructure, you don't want to be paid, you don't want to have intellectual property, you don't want to have patents. You want everybody to use it because the advantage for you is if everybody uses it. So Bitcoin is a typical base layer technology because it's not proprietary of some company, it's not Apple Pay. Apple Pay is a product, so it needs to compete and it needs to be competed with and it needs to evolve and to be always new, always new. And there are shareholder, stakeholder, brand consideration. You cannot become an Apple shareholder immediately. You have more incentives to compete with Apple than to join Apple. Well, with the open standards like Bitcoin, it's free open source. There is no intellectual property. There is no barrier. There is no also from a social scalability point of view, it's not perceived as proprietary. It's not just about license. It's also about perception. If I create the Zucco coin, which is my coin with my face, maybe it's open source, but somebody who hates me will, like some of these guys here, will not use it because there is my face. Bitcoin is the closest thing you can have to a neutral protocol. Maybe you don't like the orange logo, but there is a very small disagreement surface because it's very standard, very open. So it's closer to internet than it's closer to MySpace. MySpace was a very specific brand. Bitcoin is more close to the internet. Then there is another layer to this distinction, which is Bitcoin not just as an infrastructure, but Bitcoin as money. To make an example, if we decided the TCP/IP version 6 is better than TCP/IP version 4, and so finally after 40 years and more, we gradually migrate. Is there any reason to rebuild all the domain names from scratch? Does Wikipedia over TCP/IP 6 need to rebuild all the knowledge that was already there on TCP version 4? No, the information gets just migrated. Same thing for economical asset. Let's say that Mimblewimble is proven as something that can scale better, a little bit, that's true, more private. we think that it's less secure, but let's say that we find out that it's super secure, scalable, private. So we really decide after 40 years of Bitcoin that we move to a Mimblewimble architecture. Why does that mean that we also have to rebootstrap the asset? That's not true. I mean, the asset can stay the same, and we can just, with the proof of burn, for example, with the two-way packed sidechain, or with a lot of logic, we can just migrate without rebootstrapping the asset. Because if we rebootstrap the asset, we will have economical problems of the market finding out the value. And we will have incentive problem of people trying to speculate aggressively on the new monetization process. We will have the problem of competition with Bitcoin hodlers that will hate us and fight us. So we will not be neutral. We will be disrupting from a monetary point of view. I will argue that, for example, this is pure speculation, but I think that if Satoshi could have reused the value of gold inside the decentralized system, he would have done that instead of bootstrapping a new value from nothing, waiting for eventually the market to discover its value, because it's working out very well, but it was very risky and painful. While if you can just use the same asset, which historically used as money, you do that. And so e-gold was gold on a new layer. Bitcoin is an asset and an infrastructure. As an infrastructure is already very, very low in the complex system scale. As an asset is even lower because it's the money phase. I don't need that the children of my children will have the same infrastructure that I have. I can imagine that they migrate on a new infrastructure, but especially with the interface technology translating. But I do need to know that the value I leave them is the same value, will not be abandoned for something else. So I need intergenerational consistency in money. So I would argue that Bitcoin is very, very low. And a good thing to imagine is that if you think about that, money historically was always converging and stabilizing and never multiplying and changing unless there was a specific political pressure to do so. Fiat money comes in many variety, basically the same number of countries, a little less actually. But gold standard was basically one single form of money with different coinage. So in the Middle Ages, you had different kings put in different units of image in gold. But gold was gold. The same kind of, the price of gold based on the weight was the same across any kind of economical activity. There was silver because of this divisibility. But yeah, that's the answer, basically. Other questions? Okay. So you're very brave and you want to go on. Let's go. Oh, yeah.
In your point of view, what's your meaning about who is Satoshi?
I don't know. I think it would be very unlikely, pure speculation, to not be somebody having involved in the cypherpunk scene before. So it's possible, but there was a bunch of people, possibly a group. They could be dead. They could be. I don't believe very much in conspiracy theory about. I mean, the NSA being Satoshi. That's. I consider that very, very unlikely. But and if I had some specific theory, I will never tell that specific theory in public, because I don't like to be kidnapped and tortured and stuff like that. The thing is that we are all Satoshi except Craig Wright, and we should be happy to stay that way. I mean, maybe in when people will have Bitcoin meetups, probably, but probably not, in the year 4000 after Christ, then maybe the question will be just an interesting academic problem. Right now, after 10 years of the inception of Bitcoin, this is a very dangerous question. And most of us don't have any clue. And the ones that do have clue, they will prefer not to have any clue. And it's good to troll about that. It's good to create misdirection. It's not good to get close to the truth, because we are very close to the beginning, and that's a very dangerous question if asked seriously. Okay, so let's go across this intricate web of reasoning. The first one is the point A, where I connect 1 and 2. Basically, I say that the hard versus heavy assumption plus the Coinbase versus blockchain assumption create what I call the blockchain fallacy. What the blockchain fallacy? I will try to be very short in this deduction. Is the awareness that blockchain without a specific cryptocurrency very similar to Bitcoin doesn't make any sense. The blockchain is a specific piece of technology that is created in order to avoid double spending in an open system. If you don't have an open system, you don't need blockchain. If you don't have a double spending problem, you don't need blockchain. Not just that, but it works because you have some kind of monetary asset that can incentivize the opportunity cost of miners. Without that, you don't have opportunity cost. Without opportunity cost, you don't have any cost to mine on different histories, so you don't have any unicity of history. So blockchain is the only real stuff differentiating a cryptocurrency from anything else, and it makes sense only if you use that for something pretty similar to Bitcoin. So let's assume that anything which is not similar to Bitcoin as intention it's legit. Maybe it's pizza, maybe it's shoes, but it doesn't have anything to do with Bitcoin. So if somebody comes and has the a new kind of shoes, possible, but that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. If it has something to do with the Bitcoin technology, it's because it's something that has to be very, very similar to Bitcoin as design. Then I try to say that hard versus easy assumption plus cloning theorem brings me to the supply inflation, let's say, argument. The supply inflation argument is if everybody is incentivized to create new copies of Bitcoin, especially if there is money to be made, then everybody will. And if the money was not hard, if there was not a specific difficulty in increasing the supply, so if, let's say, if recreating Bitcoin was easy to do, then there would be the incentive for everybody to do that, then we would have inflation in supply. We would have an equivalence class. So in economy, we call them substitute goods of Bitcoin without any kind of predictable schedule. We know that the schedule of Bitcoin is predictable, but the schedule of cryptocurrencies is not predictable. The more incentives there is to create, the more they can be created. So we have two scenarios. Either it is difficult to replicate the Bitcoin features, or is not. If it's not, so you can argue that it's easy to create Bitcoin again. But if you are right, then we are fucked. Maybe cut it. Then we are in a very big problem. Because if it's easy to recreate Bitcoin, everybody will want to do that, and then we will have infinite supply of coins, even with different floating market rates, but still unpredictable supply. The more wealth enters the ecosystem, the more people is incentivized to create new supply to dilute the wealth on. So that will go on, maybe not infinitely, but indefinitely, in an unpredictable way. We lose completely the predictability and the hardness of money. So the next point, C, is top versus bottom plus immaculate conception create the arguments that I called king plausibility argument. What I mean with this? I mean that I don't know if Bitcoin can be the last one, but I know that there are some arguments, for example, the layering argument and the immaculate conception argument, that make me think that Bitcoin could have something which is impossible to replicate. So I'm not saying I'm certain that Bitcoin cannot be replicated. I'm saying it's possible that Bitcoin cannot be replicated. And I know that if it can be replicated, then it will be replicated forever, destroying hard money property. So if I put king plausibility plus supply inflation, I get that there is a cryptocurrency fallacy. Bitcoin can fail, but cryptocurrencies cannot succeed. What I mean is, maybe Bitcoin can be reproduced, But if that's the case, then we will not have hard money. And if we don't have hard money, predictable in supply, then we are back to basically to something maybe not identical, but pretty similar to fiat money. But if that's not the case, so if Bitcoin cannot be replicated, then we are safe and Bitcoin can win. So one scenario, Bitcoin win and altcoin lose. Second scenario, Bitcoin lose and altcoin lose. The scenario in which altcoins win, altcoin lose. Because anyway, we don't have our money, and we are back to basically e-cash, where everybody can print unfungible digital tokens that are worthy based on the reputation on the issuer. We get back basically to a giant scheme of barter. So there are some degrees in between these extreme, but I'm already simplifying a little bit to show the extreme scenarios. So again, Bitcoin can fail, but alternatives cannot succeed. So let's connect this together. If a blockchain without a cryptocurrency doesn't make any sense, and we can agree about that. If another cryptocurrency or plenty cryptocurrencies which don't share the same unique property of Bitcoin in the long run at equilibrium cannot make sense, then non-Bitcoin fallacy means that it's very unlikely that any project that claims to be something similar to Bitcoin, but which is not Bitcoin, can be something that can succeed. So let's appreciate how soft and nice is this sentence. It's very likely that any project that claims to be very close to Bitcoin as goals, but which is not Bitcoin, is basically doomed to fail. If we take that plus the definition of scammer, then I arrive at a very soft version of the first rule. The soft version says that if you are in a complex context where you have a lot of noise and very low signal, and you find a lot of and you hear a lot of noise, then it's safe to assume as a default heuristics that what is not Bitcoin but pretend to be similar to Bitcoin is possibly a scam. Since I add to this the simplification proviso, I cannot go around in a meetup where everybody thinks they will go out rich with a Lamborghini and explain that probably the best prima facie heuristics. I mean, people fall asleep when I finish the sentence prima facie heuristic. So what I tell them is, if it's not Bitcoin, it's a scam. Of course, I am able to elaborate the argumentation in its full extension. But what we are saying is that in a context full of noise is not useful, especially for noobs and especially for inexperienced people, to counteract the noise invasion with always very long and articulated, nuanced proposition. So in my book, just as you can say, people, you cannot trust Nigerian princes. I'm sorry for the real Nigerian princes. People, if it's not Bitcoin, it's a scam. And now you know why I say that. Let's go to the second rule. The second rule, I start from the populist theory. So there is a strong incentive for people to create conspiracy theories in which trade-offs are not real and are just created by an evil sect of reptilians. Plus, the fact that the technology Coinbase and blockchain, especially the technology blockchain, creates a lot of trade-offs. So the fact that blockchain is useful but creates a lot of limitation in scalability and in privacy, because it's a system, is a global consensus system, and global consensus systems are difficult to scale and difficult to keep private. So when people when some people see the trade-off but they cannot accept the trade-off, they will. There is an argument of expected pressure. You can expect pressure, continuous pressure, to change Bitcoin in a way that ignores the trade-offs. Like I want lower fees, I want faster things, I want more smart contract. You can say, I mean, I want confidential transaction, but then you have bigger signatures, so you slow down the system. No, that's a lie. You're a secret conspirator. I want bigger blocks, but then you will not be able to synchronize the blockchain anymore. No, that's a lie. We can do that with Gigamax. of blocks. It's just a giant conspiracy. So we can expect this kind of pressure to change Bitcoin to accommodate any kind of request, because many people will not accept that in order to get something, you have to lose something else. They will just pretend that you can have anything for nothing and have a lot of free lunches. So if you add this expected pressure plus the fact that plus the cryptocurrency fallacy, you will arrive to the no-rush argument. What is the no-rush argument? The no-rush argument is that if Bitcoin, it doesn't matter if Bitcoin doesn't do something good soon, because if it was possible to create an alternative, then without destroying everything, so violating my cryptocurrency argument, then good, then use the alternative. What is my Bitcoin cannot scale to accommodate billions of transactions on chain. This is my claim. You say that it can. Good, do it on altcoin. If you can do that, I argue that you can't, and that if you were to succeed to bootstrap an altcoin, then we would have indefinite inflation, and then we will fail with our money. But if you can, if altcoins are possible, there is no reason to change Bitcoin. But if altcoins are impossible, there is no reason to change Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the only one, is important, is precious, and we should be very cautious and conservative in changing it. So you see that this argument is that, in general, no rush. There is the argument, but if we don't change Bitcoin fast enough, something else will take over. Okay. If it's possible, let it happen. I will use that. What is the problem? If we don't increase the block size, Litecoin will take over, or Dogecoin or Dentacoin will take over. I will use Dentacoin for my financial sovereignty in the future. I'm more than happy to do that. I will admit I was wrong. Dentacoin is hard money, and I will use that. But if it's not possible for Dentacoin to take over, then there is no rush. If we can realistically accommodate two kinds of demand, we will do that gradually. But when we are in doubt, we are for status quo, because there is no rush. Nobody can outcompete Bitcoin, because if he could, we should just let him. So I hope that you understand this point, because it's I guess it's very complex, but it's key. There is no rush in changing Bitcoin. So since there is no rush, and since the complex systems are layered, so you tend to keep the lower layers of the system static and constant and reliable, and only to change the upper layer. Since there is no rush to change Bitcoin, every change that we can do at an upper layer, we should do that at an upper layer, and only very slowly, only when absolutely crystal clear and uncontentious that we can safely change the lower layer. Then we can propose, if everybody agrees, with the due time, to migrate eventually to the new version of the lower level. This is not like TCP/IP cannot change. This is, we don't destroy the internet to change TCP/IP. Eventually, people maybe will slowly move to TCP/IP version 6, but just because version 6 is incredibly better, arguably, than version 4. So change fallacy plus definition of scam arrives to a soft version of rule 2. The soft version is when you have a lot of noise, a lot of confusion, and a lot of people saying different things and accusing each other of dishonesty or incompetence, and you don't know which is true, it's a very safe heuristic, prima facie, to assume that any attempt to change Bitcoin fundamentally is motivated by ill intention or conspiracy theorist, or attempt to get something in exchange for nothing because of that kind of social dynamics. So you should prima facie resist attempt to change Bitcoin, and only when proved wrong, you should accept with some kind of resistance the changes in Bitcoin. Of course, if you put these together with the simplification proviso, you don't have the time to tell this sentence every time, and so you just say, whoever is proposing a change of Bitcoin, that's a scam, which is a very quick way to tell the same thing. Of course, that doesn't mean that we cannot have Schnorr, that we shouldn't have Segwit, that we shouldn't have the bug fixing. The idea is, sorry, I wanted to ask you your opinion about this paper proposing to change Bitcoin from a scam. Then you can, so our energies are scarce. Our time is scarce. It's not true that we are forced to read everything, to debate everything, to study everything. We have a scarce quantity of time, and we should choose some criteria in order to allocate our time. I think that this is a very good criteria. If somebody is starting to propose to change Bitcoin before explaining clearly why there is no other way, then you should probably allocate your energy somewhere else until you're proven wrong. When you're proven wrong, you say, "Ah, sorry, I was wrong. You were right," and you go back. So this is the other one, which is King plausibility plus R versus easy. So since it's possible that Bitcoin is impossible to reproduce, so I'm not certain, but it could be. And since hard money will be disruptive, then we can imagine the hypothesis called hyper-Bitcoinization, which is an hypothesis in which the entire economy of the world changes completely, inflation rate goes down, time preference of the economical actor goes down a lot, interest rates, they go up to the natural level. So all the macroeconomics is completely changed. We stop borrowing money in order to buy our house, but we start saving money in order to buy a house. So basically, economy gets more similar to the economy that our grandparents were living, instead of today's economy of bubbles and business cycles, etc. So if this hypothesis exists, then this hypothesis plus the blockchain fallacy, so the reason that this technology is specifically needed only for the specific purpose of a decentralized system, means that means what they call the adoption fallacy. It doesn't, which is like a kind of more specific version of the hard versus easy assumption. It doesn't really matter that people adopt. Mass adoption is not a priority. It's a nice to have, but the priority is to have something that works and works as intended. If we have Bitcoin, which is a niche and works, that's nice. If we have Bitcoin, which is mass adopted and works, that's great, and eventually we will get there. If we have Bitcoin, which is mass adopted but doesn't work as intended, then we have zero, because we already had alternatives to Bitcoin not being like Bitcoin. The world is full of money which don't have the characteristic of Bitcoin. So mass adoption is not the #1 priority. It's a priority which is completely submitted to the conservative priority of keeping Bitcoin doing what it does effectively. Adoption fallacy plus scam definition brings me to a soft version of rule 3, which is it's very likely that every kind of message that you get that focus on the adoption of Bitcoin as a transactional money right now, instead of focusing on the possible hyper-Bitcoinization scenario in which Bitcoin gets a monetary value for real in the long run, it's very likely that this kind of pressure are mostly marketing and mostly marketing red herring. So when you have this big company that is accepting Bitcoin, like Overstock accepting Bitcoin, I mean, I like Overstock, but back then we used to consider this kind of news like the most bullish news for Bitcoin. Well, it is not actually. If you think about that, adoption per se just means some random website accepting Bitcoin through a centralized payment processor, and then selling Bitcoin at open market immediately, crushing the price. So instead of having people accumulating the store of value, which is the first historical function of Bitcoin or of money, you have people selling Bitcoin in the open market immediately and not even storing Bitcoin as money. So the point is not really adoption, and whoever is telling you that adoption is the point is probably doing that because of the direct image or marketing return. Let's say it's possible that, that the push for spending is not motivated purely by good intention. Is also motivated by the fact, and this is like a simplified version of Proviso 3, which is basically rule. Spending Bitcoin is not scam. Pushing people to spend Bitcoin, going at a grand length in order to push somebody that was not spending to spend, that's probably scammy. There is something called Gresham law, which is basically says that that's applied to fiat money when you have a nominal fiscal conversion, but basically says that if there is good money and bad money circulates a lot in the economy because everybody wants to get rid, while good money disappears from the economy because it's still used, but it is used in order to store wealth and not just to transfer. Let's imagine you are in Venezuela right now, and now the Bolivar is inflated, hyperinflated every day. So you have some US dollars that you received in the black market of Venezuela, which works basically based on US dollars. So you have some US dollar, and you have some Bolivar. You have to pay. If the merchant is going to accept both at the right exchange rate, which one are you going to spend first? The one that tomorrow is going to devaluate probably 20%, or the one which has the relatively better characteristic of course, in the long run, US dollar is a terrible store of value. But in the very short run, compared with the Bolivar, is a great store of value. So which one do you spend? The Bolivar. This is not exactly the Gresham law. It could be called the tier law. Anyway, there are different names for this phenomenon. But the idea is good money, right because it's good, is mostly used to store wealth instead of to spend when you have a bad alternative. When the bad alternative is exchanged so much that it collapses under inflation and is not usable anymore because now you have to go around with wheelbars of money like in Zimbabwe or in Weimar Republic, then people stops accepting the bad money, and then you get back spending the good money, and you also had a very good advantage economically if you are the one who took the hard version of money. So the quick version of this is whoever push people to spend Bitcoin if they have alternative is scamming them. Of course, if they don't have alternative, if you want to, I mean, if you need to move money between Africa and Canada, and a wire transfer will take forever, costing you half of the money, you should spend Bitcoin because that's what Bitcoin can give you a better value. But if you have alternatives and you can pay the pizza with euro or with Bolivar or with Bitcoin, you should first spend Bolivar, then euro, and then Bitcoin. And the alternative is asking people to be economically irrational. So the last one, and then I go to the final slide. This is a picture of a great, about this thing about spending Bitcoin. There is this great old article by Michael Goldstein called Everyone's a Scammer, which is part of the inspiration of my presentation. It's a very nice article. It says basically that every merchant asking for your Bitcoin basically is telling you either that he doesn't believe in Bitcoin, or that he does believe in Bitcoin and does prefer that you lose money in the short long term than him. So he wants your Bitcoin. So it's semi-ironic, of course. It's tongue-in-cheek, but it's also very serious as implication. So the last rule is if there is a social layer in Bitcoin. So if social attacks on the social protocol are possible, and if they have zero cost, and in a regulator, if we want to give up the traditional regulatory system, or we want to make the statist censorship system obsolete, then, as we said, we have to put more effort, not less effort, into debunking lies, calling out bad actors, etc. If you put this thing together, you get to a soft version of Rule 4, which is when you can, as a person and as an ecosystem, put some social cost to social attack, is not a bad thing to do that. Because, for example, the fact today there was the discussion about the deep reorg of Bitcoin after the hack, and that there was some guy saying it's very bad that you guys are suggesting to attack, basically to defraud people money, because if you do a deep reorg, some people has been paid with the money that the hacker stole. So these people that have been paid, they will lose money that will get back to the people that were incompetent to defend their money. So you are bailing out incompetence and you are punishing normal people accepting Bitcoin. So you are damaging Bitcoin. But another guy was saying, yeah, but this is a bad idea. But you shouldn't be so harsh with people having bad ideas. Because anyway, if Bitcoin is anti-fragile, that means that there is no reason to be nasty with people. But my take on this is that part of the reason that Bitcoin is anti-fragile is that people has a social cost into exposing bad ideas. The more bad ideas you try to pass through, the more your reputation will suffer, and the more your ego will suffer, because people will call you out. People in Bitcoin will tell you as it is, will call, they will basically not take back any criticism, and that's a healthy thing, because there is a social cost in being stupid in Bitcoin, and that's part of the reason Bitcoin as a system is very resilient. So with the simplification proviso, we arrive to the last rule, which is we shouldn't be nice with scammer. And now for the final slide, I would just love to, this is the web, but it kind of works. I can make it better, but this was just 3 hours in the night before Riga. Eventually we'll make a version maybe with less assumption. The last slide is a collection of strawman arguments. Strawman arguments are you know the strawman technique. The strawman technique is fighting your position, not as it is, but using a fake version of a fake, weaker version of your position. So one typical strawman argument against Bitcoin maximalist is maximalist mean rules 1, 2, 3, and 4 literally, as we already explained in the slide at the beginning of the presentation. We are not meaning that literally. There are a lot. Pizza is not a scam, even if it's not Bitcoin. That's in order to close that argument. Maximalists think that Bitcoin is perfect and will succeed for sure. That's absolutely not true. When we say that everything which is not Bitcoin in the Bitcoin sphere is most likely a scam, we don't mean that Bitcoin is going to succeed. We mean that we are fairly sure that altcoins, that shitcoins are going to fail. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin is going to succeed. Bitcoin is not is not the perfect solution. It's the best solution that we can use in reality right now for a long list of arguments that I hope I already conveyed a little bit in the presentation. But Bitcoin is not perfect. Bitcoin has flaws. Bitcoin has shortcomings. Bitcoin can fail in different failure scenarios. When we are being maximalists, we try to tell people that if Bitcoin can fail, shitcoins must almost certainly fail in comparison because of all the advantages that Bitcoin has. But we are not saying that Bitcoin cannot fail. We say that it's likely that if it fails, we could not have second chances, or at least for a long time. Maximalists think that a better technology than what I call LNP-BP, so this is like a little bit, I'm trying to promote this stuff, so help me out here. Nobody's taking it up, but it's brilliant. So we have TCP/IP, where IP is the base layer, very decentralized but very inefficient, and then TCP is a direct routing connection. And so we can have Bitcoin protocol instead of Internet protocol, and Lightning Network protocol instead of TCP. So it's nice. LNP-BP version 4. I mean, I promote this. Nobody's following me. Maximalists think that a better technology than LNP-BP, so Bitcoin, is impossible. That's not true. We know for certain, for example, that a Schnorr Bitcoin will be way better than a CDSA Bitcoin. We suspect that a client-side validation Bitcoin will be better than a global consensus Bitcoin. We know that a Bitcoin with SegWit from day one would have been better than a Bitcoin without SegWit from day one. We suspect that, I suspect that a Mimblewimble Bitcoin could be eventually better than Bitcoin. So we know that the technology platform can be made better and is not perfect. The point is that we don't think that we should change it aggressively, and we don't think that changing means bootstrapping a new asset from scratch. We should reuse the same asset. Maximalist thinks that scamming per se will eventually disappear. This is a straw man which is very often used like, yeah, you are fighting scammers, but scammers will always be there. You cannot really expect that when altcoins will fail, scammers will all become honest. Scamming is a human nature. So there is nothing in this exposition of Bitcoin maximalism that talks about a magical promised land where nobody is scamming anybody. People will continue to scam everybody forever. What we are saying is that the specific scam coins have very, very, very low chances to become adopted as money. Not that scams as such will disappear forever. Everybody will scam people, even using Bitcoin, forever. Shitcoins are a scam. Bitcoin could be a scam, very well. There will be a lot of Bitcoin scam. When shitcoins will start to fade away, Bitcoin will be filled with scammers, using Bitcoin to scam people. Maximalists think that the economic value of scams will literally go to zero. This is another straw argument. It's basically impossible for anything that historically had a value different from zero at a certain point in time to have a value of zero eventually, because in the worst case scenario, it will become a collectible. Let's imagine that we are in the year 5000, and we are using Bitcoin for everything. And one Satoshi is $10, and we are very happy, and there is no financial censorship, there is big financial inclusion. But then there is somebody holding a private key of something that was a Litecoin address. This will not have zero value, because even just the historical fact that altcoins have existed at a certain point in time will make them likely. There are pictures, there are art items exchanging in the art market, a modern art market especially, that are really beyond my comprehension, but they have some value. They are not money, they are not liquid, they are not used as store of value. They are not used. They are used speculatively or for some specific regulation avoidance reasons. But there is people giving. Collectors are giving value literally to everything. So nobody of us is assuming that the price of every crypto. For any of you that was already here in 2014 or something, Aurora coin still has a value more than zero. None of this shit will go to literally zero. It's basically impossible. As long as there was one historical exchange with a value, there is an historical value as a collectible. People will always exchange. Maybe this blockchain will not have any more people mining it, probably, but the private keys containing shitcoins will probably have some value different from zero in the long term. What I expect is that what is the value? What is the market cap of post-stamps, collectible post-stamps? I don't know. I assume that is a couple of order of magnitude less than shitcoins right now. So what I expect is a way lower value than now. While Bitcoin, if it works as money, will have orders of magnitude more value than now. So when we expect the decoupling, we don't mean Bitcoin goes to the moon and shitcoins goes to literally zero, but to something reasonable for what they are, which is basically collectibles at best. And the last point is maximalist advocates the use of violence against scams. I talked a little bit of this even before during one of the assumptions. If you are libertarian, if you are for free market competition, you should not stop other people from competing or from experimenting. Maybe this shitcoin is stupid, but who are you to stop me from doing that? So Bitcoin maximalism has nothing, zero to do with stopping people by using force or coercion by doing stupid shit. They can do that. They can do that all day long. We are just as free as they are to do stupid shit. We are as free to call them out, to explain why it's stupid, as long as we want, as long as we feel like explaining. So this is not a debate against freedom and censorship. When I have a private chat, we have a chat on Telegram in Italy back then, Bitcoin Italia. And when there was the altcoin craziness, people was insisting that they should have been able to promote scam coins on the Telegram chat. I applied the same kind of moderation that I would have applied to people promoting a travel agency on the Bitcoin Telegram channel. The problem is just moderation. It has nothing to do with censorship. If you want to open, actually, there is one Bitcoin Italia Telegram chat, and there are probably 200, 300 scam coin chats. So let's go there. Nobody, I mean, don't be scared by maximalists. The worst that they can do is call out your bullshit if you exaggerate with that. That's the worst that we can do. We cannot bite, we will not punch you, we will not arrest you, we will not call for you to be arrested. Of course, if some of the most extreme scammers get arrested, I will not cry all night. But I will be a little bit sad when many of these scammers will be arrested. So we are not violent, we are not advocating violence, we are not advocating censorship. We want to be free to tell what we think is true with the same degree of freedom than people scamming other people. That's simple. Maximalists never trade on scams. That's not true. Like, I don't trade scam coins because I'm a terrible trader. So I don't do that. But I think it's completely legit and completely honest for a maximalist to trade scam coins. Why? When you buy something, you're not telling to the, if I buy, I don't know, Tron, I'm not telling everybody that the Tron technology make any sense at all. I'm just telling everybody that I think that the price will be higher at a certain point in the future. And that's the truth. I'm not lying. I really think that people are stupid, and so the price will be higher. So I am buying, and with my purchase, I'm communicating my expectation for the price to be higher. And when I'm selling, if I'm not lying to people, the act of selling is the act with which a speculator tells to the market, guys, I think that the value of this stuff will be lower in the future. So take it, because I don't want it anymore. I prefer something in exchange. So you are telling the market that you expect the price to go down. So selling scam coins is nothing wrong. It's something which is actually very helpful for the market. Scam coin traders are heroes. They help the market to become efficient. They spread information about demand and offer, and they regulate, and they bring the market to equilibrium. We are not against scam coin traders. The only problem is when one scam coin pumper, in order to trade, he will spread lies and misconception. So he creates a blog post lying about Bitcoin so that this specific scam coin can rise in price. He will buy, he will lie, he will sell. That's a problem, but for the lying part, which create confusion, and some of us, especially people who are very passionate about logic, reason, and education, they just don't like confusion. And so when people is creating confusion in order to get profit, we get annoyed and we like to expose them. That's all. Maximalists said during a presentation in Uster that the Earth is flat. This is a straw man argument. I say that the universe may be flat if we find some kind of correspondence between the Sitter universe and conformal field theory. And the last straw man argument is, my baby is dying, censorship, toxic maxis, I want my latte. Thank you.